Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. I'm your host for today. I'm Jem, and I'm here with my friends Alex and Matt. So, before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gaming the system for some exclusive content. Or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address, wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com.
The jobs of creating games are all quote-unquote nerdy jobs. And gaming itself has always been seen as the place of nerds. And I read an article a while ago about the Big Bang Theory and how that has normalised the sort of sexual dysfunction and problematicness of nerdy young men. And just make, it's funny the extremely fucked up weird shit that Howard and I can't remember the other's name, the main three, except Sheldon. And it's just when you take a step back from it and look at it, you go, this is really there's some insidious stuff here. And whereas in movies, the jobs around it are all practical jobs that are doing things with your hands jobs, whereas everything to do with gaming is more conducive to a nerdy background, and nerds can have a different outlook on life and have different role models. And so I think that's probably an element that plays into it as well.
And that comes down to diversity again, doesn't it? I wanted to pick on what you said, Alex, earlier about the emotional investment that you have in characters when you're gaming, because we are controlling our characters, and we've talked before about the emotional attachment that you might find between yourself and your character. Is that is there more of a risk then that sexually explicit or violent scenes that occur to your character or are perpetrated by your character can have a stronger emotional impact on us than if we're just watching it on the television or reading it in a book or listening to it on the radio even? Are these scenes potentially more intense when we're experiencing them in this way?
I'd say so, but that's my own experience. It's not quite the same content, but if you've played It Takes Two, have both of you played it? You know the part where
I have, yeah. I was thinking of it actually when we were talking about this.
With it's like a little cuddly toy.
Is this the one that you have to kill it, or is that the monkey?
Off.
Yeah.
And then all in order to make your child cry, which again has the added, like the reason behind it is to make your child cry, which is pretty awful when you think about you're playing two parents. But the whole of that process, I couldn't stop talking about it for like a couple of days. I was just like, it just felt so weird. It was funny, but also I think it was more like it just unsettling than it was. It's not something that I've ever done in a game before, but I think it definitely makes the player think about the morals behind what they're doing, which I think perhaps comes into play when we think about sexual content as well, because obviously that kind of crosses over as well. But it's just, I think because you're actually doing it, it makes you feel like really guilty as well. So, and you sit with that for a little while, you're like, I don't know if I want to carry on now. Whereas with a film, you've watched a section and then immediately you're on to the next one, and your brain's already sort of processing those next bits, and so the impact of it is a little less um, strong for me personally, anyway. But yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that obviously there's a difference, isn't there, in how we experience those scenes as gamers and how the actors experience those scenes as actors, as the people portraying those scenes. And I'm thinking about, you mentioned about this parapsychology, parasocial attitudes. And I remember years ago hearing about how actors in soap operas would get people coming up to them and shouting at them in the street when they were playing a particularly bad character. And I think that it's interesting to think about how, especially when you think about Baldur's Gate 3, how the voice actors are now mini celebs off the back of their voice acting. So, you know, you have the guy, I can't remember any of the voice actors' names, so I'm very sorry because I love them all, but the guy who plays Gale, you know, he's everywhere doing Gale commentary, and the guy that plays Astarion, you know, they're all out there, and the women playing Shadowheart and Lae'zel, you know, they're all out there kind of riding the wave of Baldur's Gate 3's success as the characters that they voiced. So the fact that that's happening is because we've all connected, so those of us who played it have connected so strongly with those characters. So when, as an actor, when you go into those kind of scenes, I'm just wondering, like, how intense that must be, knowing that is how you're going to run this scene and people are going to have an emotional reaction to that. And on one hand, I feel like that's an excellent thing for an actor. I mean, you know, you want to connect with people, I'm sure, and you want people to believe your character. But I can also see that there is this need to, or perhaps even a potentially greater need than in Hollywood, to protect those actors from the potential around that.
I wonder so often about how, like, the perspective on their work that actors need to have to not go insane, because there are, if you think about all the, like, iconic performances of things, an actor can't go into something going, right, I'm going to do something iconic today. They need to bring, like, their personal themselves into the role, and that's how you get human connection. And the best way to do that is to have them be completely relaxed on set and be then able to, because you can't play someone, or it's much harder to play someone like Astarion when you're tense and stressed, because he's so all the time. And I realise that he reminds me of Julian Clary and Kenneth. I think it's Kenneth Williams from the Carry On films. That same kind of voice. And there's the fact that you can in the Elden Ring expansion, Shadow of the Erdtree, there's this dragon called Baal the Dread, and there's this guy who's dying halfway up the mountain saying, "When you fight Baal, call on my spirit so that I can fight him with you." And when you summon him, he spends the entire fight going, "Baal, I will smite you from the afterlife, Baal." And he has become a sort of a cult figure because people love the way he shouts about Baal so much. And he did an interview where he said he just spent like 8 hours screaming into a microphone, And you think, oh, that sounds like fun, and it's not a body arduous thing, but the voice is unbelievably complicated, and it is an actor's entire job is their voice and the anatomy of their voice, and so it has to have the fun bits. There's so much fun that almost anything can be fun, but only if you're safe doing it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Another thing
I think that's one of the things.
Sorry. I was just going to say, because they do
Sorry, go on.
They do it all out of order as well. It's not like it's done chronologically. So they'd have to have those different highs and lows of emotion all at different times, because they're doing it in whatever order suits the developers as well. And sometimes, they'll be working with some people who are at the end of their story right at the start because of other commitments that those actors will have. So yeah, it's a really, I don't deny the skill of everyone working in acting and voice acting, because they've got to bring it, even if it's all in a different order as well.
And you have to, for the longest time, it was only audio. And some of the best actors on the planet are ones who only do audio, so like cartoons or anime stuff. This voice actor who played the guy who hates Bale, he said he didn't really realise that it was a dragon he was shouting about. So you just they rarely have the full picture, and it's even harder with gaming because you don't have a clue what's going on around you. Whereas if you're on set, you go, right, there's a car over there that's on fire and this and that. You go, I could be in Cyberpunk 27 at the top of a skyscraper shouting at a robot, or I could be in Elden Ring shouting at a dragon. And yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, and I mean, in the article that we were originally talking about, they do actually speak to a casting director who was also previously a motion capture performer, and she talks about a time when she just turned up and was told she was going to be doing a graphic rape scene with another actor, a male actor, with no prior warning. Somebody else talked about how they were asked to vocalize a full-on sex scene that had been graphically generated, and they were just doing the voiceover, but they were sat in a booth with a sort of bank of male sound recorders and directors and all of that sort of staring at them, and they were just saying they felt really uncomfortable in that environment, but didn't feel able to say anything because they were freelance and they were just trying to avoid getting labelled as a troublemaker. So there's a lot of pressure put on these actors who are, as we've just said, doing quite a challenging job, and who can, when they get it right, give us such a positive form of entertainment and an immersive experience. So again, I feel that they've been failed by their industry, by the games industry and the wider acting world, that they've not been better protected from this, because it seems like very basic, and I know it's part of the equity guidelines, that they should have prior access to the scripts, and they should have the information on what they're going to be expected to do, and the ability to ask for certain setting changes in order to make them feel more comfortable when they're doing that, but they're not getting that in some situations, and it's causing quite a lot of distress, whereas Hollywood has kind of got that down. I'm not saying they get it right all the time, but they are working harder on that. So it's good to see that Equity are kind of raising this as an issue, and hopefully it will take more be taken more seriously going forward. And I think that the success of Baldur's Gate 3 and the celebrity of the voice actors will help that. Actually, will just push that forward and give them more meaning. But I feel like we can't talk about all of this without recognizing that this is all against a backdrop of a wider issue that's going on for voice actors, particularly in the games industry. And I think, Matt, you wanted to give us a bit of a bit of information about what's going on and why we need to be aware of it.
Yeah, so things are looking up for the video games industry in the UK, because Equity, you mentioned, to do all the actors and that kind of thing in the UK, now has a video game workers branch. What's it called? Equity's Video Game Working Party, made up of equity boards, equity members and external consultants, and they've been working on minimum guidance, minimum rates of things, and best practice guidelines for performers, and that's extremely exciting. And what I think unions should do, and that they should always have been doing, is when there's a problem, you strike, then you talk to the company. Whereas what happens is the company does something, the person reports it to the union goes to the company and says, "Oh, can we please talk about this?" And the company goes, "Fuck you, we're not doing anything. We'd enslave you if we could, if it wasn't illegal, so fuck off." And then the union build up momentum to strike, and then they sit down and have a conversation. Whereas if you just go, right, you tried to get this actor to do a sex scene, she didn't want to, and she contacted us, we're going to go on strike, we're going to picket your business for a week, and all the other, so there are cities like Bath and Bristol and I think Brighton as well that are sort of hubs for the UK games industry. If you get a union chapter coordinating all of the games companies in, say, Bristol, and then when one of them does something like this, all the other ones go on strike alongside it, then all the companies in that zone would be getting together going, like, we need to be on the same page dealing with the union as well, because you fucking up costs us money now. And each union needs to have a manifesto. It's a list of the standards that go, if you put one toe over this line, we're going to strike, okay? And then that needs to be the dynamic between them. And this is really, really exciting stuff, because I think there are 2,500 games workers in the UK, and the UK games industry is worth almost £8 billion. And so there's always, every single time a company says, "Oh, there just isn't enough money," they're always lying. And the only way to get that is through unions. And one of those things is we talk about artificial intelligence, explicit and intimate scenes, and one interesting thing I hadn't considered is overusing non-disclosure agreements, because sort of the flavour of part of the AI conversation, and it was mentioned in the last article, is when you take on a job, what you are giving the company permission to do with regards to your life. Because what the companies want is they say, right, when you do one job for us, we own your digital image, so we can make your digital image do whatever we want. You're giving us the rights to the way that your voice sounds, so we can recreate that with AI. And then also through non-disclosure agreements, we want to control what you do outside of the game design process as well. And what we want to do for that is to pay you a tiny sum once, and then that'd be that. So that, I don't think that's a sort of these stuff is like very well sort of understood at large by the people who consume the games media. So do you think that, how do you think gamers, like the average gamer, reacts to seeing this kind of stuff?
I think it's positive for me, if you count me as an average gamer, because it's actually laying bare what's not happening at the moment and what should be within the industry, and what people are fighting for within the industry. So I think it's a good eye-opener. I don't know if the average gamer would be aware of what is or isn't happening within the industry in terms of people's rights. So I think it's good that it's being talked about, and that it's being made clear, because it helps to raise awareness about like the content that we are consuming as gamers, how that is brought about, and the systems that are in operation, and how those systems are, for a large part, probably quite unjust in the way that they operate. Like many things in society, there are all sorts of underlying barriers and prejudices that inform those barriers, whether we know them or not. They could be conscious or unconscious. But having more awareness about any of the ways that things operate, and the things that companies are trying to do to exploit their workers, I think can only be a positive thing, because that's what leads to fighting it, and that's what leads to change, is fighting it. So
Absolutely. I mean, the video games performance in the industry went out on strike on the 26th of July, and they're still striking because even though in the US and across the sort of movie and TV boards, there was an agreement made last year regarding AI and the use of actors, I don't know, images and voices and all of that, that was made, agreement was made with the Hollywood actors. It's a similar agreement for games industry actors just hasn't come to pass. And I think it's interesting again that we're talking about how slow the games industry is to pick up these same rights that we're seeing for the other industries for similar work. I suppose that's what this is at the end of the day. Whether you're acting in a game or you're acting in a movie, the job is acting. The medium might be different, but the job is acting, and they should be given the similar rights. And I think the NDAs that you talked about, Matt, is also interesting because that has been used as an excuse for why they can't be given some of the information beforehand, or why they can't be why they're unable to access advice and support from outside of the sort of immediate game they're working on, and to sort of say, like, can we have an intimacy coordinator, or could we I've spoken to this person and they're concerned about the scene. So I think it's sort of those kind of things are stopping people from talking. I think NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, for anyone who hasn't heard the term before, I think they definitely have an understandable place when you're trying to do something that's new and you don't want your competitors to get hold of it and all of that. But more often than not, they just seem to really cause problems for the individuals involved. And I think that is where the unions can come in. And so I'm absolutely with you, Matt, on that unionising is a really good way for people to protect themselves from this kind of industry-wide attitude. And I think that the biggest concern here is AI, because it can, as you say, Matt, they can utilise the content that actors have already provided. Potentially, there's concerns about that, and then there's concerns about the fact that if you're not having to see an actor on the screen, then maybe they can just fake their voices for you, and so
Let's cut out the middleman kind of way of thinking, isn't it? It's all about efficiency for them, I suppose, and cutting costs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another difference is it costs a lot of money to set up a scene in TV. It costs a studio nothing to have a little recording room. Where do you think the money that is saved in the difference in those things in the game industry goes? It doesn't go to the workers. It probably just goes to the executives. So, it blows my mind why video games are apparently so expensive, because literally all you need is computers. And you hire a set number of people, and I really don't understand how the funding of the game industry works, but either way there is enough money for everyone to be really well compensated. And another thing that unions need to do is they need to put boundaries on what contracts are, what you're allowed as an actor to give a company permission to do, because they might say, oh, we'll pay you an extra £2,000 if we say we can use your likeness for anything we want in the game. And a union needs to be able to step in and say, right, that that's not allowed in our contracts, because that just can't be a thing. There need to be hard boundaries on certain elements. And then when it comes to NDAs, there are places for NDAs in these things, but it needs to be, if it's a company working in an equitable partnership with an actor, the actor can trust the company going, they're not going to ask me to not disclose something, they're not going to abuse and exploit this NDA. Whereas what it's almost always used for is to control the person who's signing it. And so, all this union stuff is good. Yeah. And it even says equity encourages Indian low-budget productions to contact them to discuss rates, because the Rockstar Studios and a tiny little 4-person studio are going to have different access to resources. But that doesn't mean if you haven't got the money for something, you don't get to buy the thing. So that's another element where you don't get to save money on people.
Yeah.
And that's something that's...
Or to say we couldn't afford to get somebody to come in and be an intimacy coordinator, so we just cut that corner. I mean, I hope that they're not going to have to legislate. I don't even know who would legislate in these situations, which I think is probably part of the problem. So I think we've kind of covered most of the key issues around this particular topic. Is there anything that either of you would like to add before we wrap up?
Not from me, no.
No?
I don't think so.
Thank you both so much. I was really interested in this issue because I think it's a live one, and I think we will be coming back to it again and again over the next few years. And I think it's really interesting to hear your perspectives, which are, similar but different from mine, and that's really nice. So thank you both for sharing your insights with us all, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.